Right now, millions of Americans are making a financial decision that could seriously damage their retirement security. And many of them don't fully realize the true cost. A record number of workers are pulling money out of their 401k retirement accounts early. Not to invest somewhere else, but simply to pay rent, cover a medical bill, or keep the lights on. And that matters more than you might think. Because the rules around these withdrawals have been changing. Some of those changes have made it easier than ever to access retirement money. That might sound helpful at first. But easier access also means more people are turning their retirement savings into an emergency fund. And the long-term consequences can be serious. Let's start with the numbers. In 2025, a record 6% of workers with 401k plans administered by Vanguard took what's called a hardship withdrawal. Now 6% might not sound huge at first. But before the pandemic, back in 2018, that number was closer to 2%. That means the rate has tripled. And this wasn't just a one-year spike. Hardship withdrawals have increased 6 years in a row since 2018. That tells us something important about where many American households are financially right now. But here's where things get interesting. At the exact same time that early withdrawals are hitting record highs, 401k balances are also at record highs. The average balance across Vanguard plans rose 13% in 2025 to about $167,970. Meanwhile, Fidelity, which analyzed nearly 25 million retirement accounts, reported an average balance of about $146,400, up 11%. Why? Because the stock market had a strong year. The S&P 500 gained about 16%, and the Nasdaq jumped roughly 20%. On paper, American retirement savers have never looked wealthier. So how do you explain this contradiction? How can retirement balances be at record highs, while early withdrawals are also breaking records? That question gets to the heart of what's happening in the American economy right now. Earlier this year, Donald Trump told Congress that Americans' 401ks were doing very well. And the numbers do support that. Nearly 45% of Vanguard participants increased their savings rate in 2025. And many retirement plans are now automatically enrolling workers at 6% of pay or higher, which is almost 3 times the share that did so in 2013. So yes, there has been real progress in how Americans save for retirement. But, and this is important, that progress is not evenly distributed. Some workers are building real wealth in their retirement accounts. But at the same time, a growing number of households are so financially stretched that they are willing to pay taxes, penalties, and sacrifice their future just to access cash today. And the reasons people give for these withdrawals are revealing. The top reasons workers cited were avoiding foreclosure or eviction, paying medical bills. The median withdrawal was just $1,900. That's not someone emptying their retirement account to buy a boat. That's someone trying to stay in their home or afford health care. And that's where the real story is. Now let's talk about the true cost of a hardship withdrawal. Because this is where things get serious. If you withdraw money from a 401k before age 59 and a half, the IRS treats that money as ordinary income. That means you owe income taxes on it. On top of that, unless the withdrawal meets certain qualifying conditions, you also face a 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if someone withdraws $5,000, they might owe taxes on that amount plus a $500 penalty. And that penalty usually shows up later when you file your taxes. But the real cost isn't just the tax hit. The real cost is what that money could have become over time. Financial firm Sophie estimates that if a 35-year-old withdraws $1,000 today, that same $1,000 could have grown to between about $4,700 and more than $11,000 by retirement, depending on market returns. So a small withdrawal today can cost 10 times that amount in the future. Now multiply that across millions of workers taking withdrawals averaging nearly $2,000, and you begin to see how big this trend could become for retirement security. But here's the reality. For many households, the need today is simply too urgent to worry about money 30 years from now. And broader financial data helps explain why. About 40% of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $1,000 emergency. Roughly 40% are still carrying debt from the holiday season. For many families, the 401k has quietly become their only financial backup plan. Not just a retirement account, but an emergency fund of last resort. Now you might wonder, can anyone just withdraw money from their 401k whenever they want? The answer is no. The IRS requires that workers show an immediate and heavy financial need, and they can only withdraw the amount necessary to cover it. Some common qualifying reasons include medical expenses, avoiding eviction or foreclosure, funeral expenses, repairing major damage to a primary home, certain education costs, buying a primary residence. Outside those categories, employers have some discretion in determining whether a situation qualifies. So if the rules are this strict, why are withdrawals increasing so quickly? Part of the answer is policy changes. Back in 2018, lawmakers removed a rule requiring workers to take a 401k loan first before requesting a hardship withdrawal. That used to slow things down. Removing it made withdrawals easier. Then in 2022, the Secure 2.0 Act expanded access further. It allowed hardship withdrawals for victims of domestic abuse, and for people affected by federally declared disasters. It also introduced a provision allowing workers to withdraw up to $1,000 penalty-free for certain emergency expenses once every 3 years. And if the money is repaid, they can access the provision again sooner. Vanguard itself acknowledged that because it's now easier to request hardship withdrawals, a modest increase in withdrawals isn't surprising. There's another factor at play too: automatic enrollment. Over the past decade, more employers have started automatically enrolling new workers into retirement plans. That has dramatically increased participation, especially among lower-income workers who might not have signed up otherwise. Among Vanguard's employer plans, about 61% used automatic enrollment in 2025, compared to just 34% in 2013. That's great news for retirement savings overall. But there's an interesting side effect. More workers now have retirement accounts, which means more workers have money they can withdraw during emergencies. In other words, some of the increase in withdrawals simply reflects the fact that more people now have accounts in the first place. Now let's talk briefly about Generation X. These are Americans born between 1965 and 1980, and they're the next group approaching retirement. Some of their numbers look encouraging. In 2025, Gen X workers saved an average of 15.4% of their income toward retirement. And nearly 10% made catch-up contributions, which are extra contributions allowed for people aged 50 and older. But the median 401k balance for Gen X is only about $67,100. For people in their mid-40s to early 60s, that's a serious shortfall. And many of them will not have traditional pensions. Gen X entered the workforce right as companies were moving away from pension plans and shifting responsibility for retirement entirely onto workers through 401ks. Some workers adapted well. Others struggled. The data reflects that divide. There are now 665,000 retirement accounts with balances over $1 million, up from 537,000 the year before. About 60% of those million-dollar accounts belong to Gen X savers. But those success stories represent only a small share of the generation. The median balance of $67,100 tells a very different story for most people. So what does all this mean? In many ways, the United States is now seeing two financial realities at the same time. In one economy, retirement accounts are growing, savings rates are improving, and some households are building real wealth. In the other, many families are so financially stretched that they are quietly draining their future just to survive the present. The takeaway here isn't that 401ks are bad. And it's not that people who take hardship withdrawals made a wrong decision. Sometimes you're facing eviction. Sometimes you're dealing with a medical emergency. And in those moments, you do what you have to do. But understanding the true cost of an early withdrawal, the taxes, the penalties, and the long-term loss of compound growth, is incredibly important. Because sometimes there are alternatives worth exploring first. That might include a payment plan with a hospital, a short-term personal loan, or speaking with a nonprofit credit counselor. And if you feel like you're behind on retirement savings, you're far from alone. The data actually shows that workers who save consistently for 15 years or more can still build meaningful retirement security. Time and consistency are still the two most powerful tools you have. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.